So I had not touched this deck in months. So when I decided to take a look at it and see if it could be updated, the first thing I did was just play out some duels and see if there was any recurring pattern in the duels that I lost. Because obviously, if you want to improve something, one of the first things you want to look at is see what weaknesses, if any, can be improved. So, I did exactly that. I played out some duels, some matches, and there was indeed one recurring theme that I noticed. That was, as long as I wasn't getting floodgated, Gimmick Puppet or some random floodgate, many of the duels that I lost weren't necessarily because I misplayed or did something wrong, but rather because I was simply getting out card advantaged. To put it bluntly, if your opponent has 6 interactions and you have 6 cards in hand, they can just trade 1-for-1 with every one of your cards, and as long as they have engine, they can just kill you on the follow-up turn. Which, it's pretty obvious, but it's good to point it out, right? It's good to actually identify, what's the thing. Because consistency isn't exactly an issue with this deck. Power isn't necessarily an issue with this deck. It's more just it didn't plus as much, right? So that's one of the first things I tried to improve. What things can I do to generate card advantage? So funny enough, I actually looked at every single one of the Odd Eyes and Performapal cards printed, and guess what? Turns out not many of them actually help in terms of generating card advantage, right? Which makes sense because most of the Odd Eyes cards were printed sometime between 2014 and 2017. So, it makes sense that a 6-year-old deck or 7-8-year-old cards wouldn't be able to keep up with modern cards, at least not in terms of card advantage. But that doesn't mean that we can't, do a couple things to improve that. So at that point, just started looking outside of the Odd Eyes Performapal archetype to see what other cards could be incorporated. And not only that, but one thing I noticed I wasn't really using as much before was Pendulum summoning cards from the extra deck. Because obviously, if you Pendulum summon out monsters from the extra deck, you're basically getting free resources, right? So it's much better to, make a Link 2 play before your Pendulum summon, which again, should be obvious, but it wasn't exactly that obvious to me before. So I started looking for extenders I could use, and specifically, I was looking for extenders that actually generate card advantage. Since I have 2 very important Link 2s that I want to be able to go into first turn, being Hieratic Seal and Beyond the Pendulum, I was looking for extenders that generate your advantage and were dragon type. So that means that I could go into either one of these depending on what I want to do and depending on the matchup. So eventually, one of the first cards I added to the deck was the Bystial Magnamhut because it fills all those roles. It's an extender, it's a +1, and it's a dragon, so I can use it for Seal or for Beyond the Pendulum. And this card's insane. I'll talk about it throughout the video, but this card's insane. It's really nice. And there are multiple ways to get a light or dark in your own graveyard to summon him out. So it's almost every time you draw him, you're going to be able to summon him out even before you Pendulum summon. And worst case scenario, if you don't have a light or dark engraved, then like I said, you can just Pendulum summon him out because he is a 6 and your scales allow for that. The other big change I made to the deck was 3 copies of Triple Tactics Talents, because in Yu-Gi-Oh! You win one of 2 ways. Generally, you either do something unfair, so 5-zone lock your opponent, Gimmick Puppet luck your opponent, debarrier your opponent, Nat Beast your opponent, etc, etc, or you do something kind of like what Sprite does when it's not summoning the turtle, which is to generate so much card advantage that you can just trade with your opponent 1-for-1 and you still come out on top. Triple Tactics helps in both of those regards because, in general, this card's insane, but specifically in this deck, it's good for the Monster Steal effect because since Beyond the Pendulum is half generic, you can use whatever you steal from them to go into Beyond the Pendulum. And you basically go 1-for-3 in terms of value because you steal a monster, number 1. Number 2, usually you can use that monster to threaten going into battle phase and running over something else. And number 3, as I just said, you can then use that monster to go into Beyond the Pendulum, search something, and then make a big Pendulum summon. But also, the hand rip effect is also insane. And again, that technically applies to any deck that plays this, but specifically when you play a deck like this that actually ends on an Omni Negate basically every single time, having near perfect hand knowledge of your opponent is absolutely wild. So I really like triple tactics in that regard for this deck. So those were the main changes I did to the main deck, although there were various other changes as well as to the extra deck, like cutting out some cards that were too niche, or just cutting out many cards that just didn't generate me advantage, and I just made it like more streamlined for cards that make you go +1. So now I'd actually like to show you guys some combo lines with the deck, because the profile will make more sense if you actually know what the deck is aiming to do. That being said, I should point out, this is an aggro deck. Like, if you actually read the Odd Ice cards, they're literally made for an aggro playstyle. And so, I just went down that, that path. The main aim of the deck is to make a Pendulum summon of big, beefy dragons and just start punching over the opponent. And, if you're not able to OTK on the spot, then that's when you start doing vortex control shenanigans, right? And you start using your extra deck as a toolbox to actually start controlling the game. That being said, even though it is an aggro deck, you do want to go first, because right now, 2023, the way the decks are, you definitely do not want your opponent setting up on you, especially not on a deck like this, which is a Pendulum deck. So it has many upsides. It's Pendulum summon basically, but it also has many downsides in terms of being interruptible. So, you definitely want to be able to go first for the single reason of stopping your opponent from setting up on you. And then when it spins back to your turn, that's when you make a bigger Pendulum summon and you just kill them right there on the spot. So yeah, let's first show you some combo lines. So firstly, we have what I call the classic Odd Ice combo, which is basically Arc Pendulum, Darkwurm, and any low scale Odd Ice card. Although Odd Ice Pend, the original, is the best one. It's the best one because if your plays get stopped in the end phase, this is still going to trigger to search, meaning you still get a summon off of Arc Pend, and you can summon out something like Persona, for example. So even if you get Imperm Rash throughout your combo, this will still make this resolve. But the combo itself is, you normal summon this, search out either of the gates, 0 or Infinity, scale your low scale, scale your Arc Pendulum, Pendulum summon out for 1. You use the gate's monster effect, targeting the low scale, to blow them both up and summon a dragon from the extra deck. What you summon doesn't really matter for this combo, so I'm just going to put a card face down, but this is basically any dragon. And at this point, you get to trigger Arc Pendulum's scale effect and this thing's monster effect. Gate 0 is going to put himself in the scale, and Arc Pendulum will summon out Dissolver from the deck. Use Dissolver to fusion summon, so you basically use him and the gate to summon out Vortex on your 5th summon, so combo's Nibiru proof. And then you use Darkwurm and the dragon that you summoned out for Heretic Seal. So this right here is 3 interruptions, because you have Vortex Omni Negate, Seal Bounce, and also Seal Summon Persona from deck, which is an imperm for extra deck monsters. So that's the first play. Although, of course, if you had more cards in hand, you could do more stuff, That was just a 3-card play with highly searchable cards, mind you. But anyway, now this next play is a 4-card play, but I have to emphasize 2 things. Number 1, it's with 4 cards that are very, very searchable or just likely for you to open, because 2 of the 4 cards are Arc Pendulum and Odd Ice Pendulum Dragon, which again are extremely searchable. The 3rd one is literally any level 7 in the game, it does not matter what it is. And the 4th one is Supreme King Darkwurm. Not only that, but realistically, there's only 1 point throughout the entire combo where you can get hand trapped, and you'll see it right now. Because basically, it's your normal summon. Because your normal summon, use Darkwurm effect to search. At this point, if they actually Ash or Imperm this, it doesn't matter, because you're going to be able to do other stuff with your hand. But if it does go through, then you pretty much can't get hand trapped from here on out, because you're going to search either of the gates, doesn't really matter which one, 0 or Infinity, scale Odd Ice Pendulum, scale Odd Ice Arc, and you Pendulum summon for 2. The gate and the level 7, and you might see where this is going. You're going to overlay the level 7s for Odd Ice Absolute, and at this point you've made 4 summons, so you still can't get nibbed. And from here, use these 2 dragons to go into Hieratic Seal. And at this point, you've made your 5th summon. So if they want to nib, they can. But obviously, that's going to trigger Seal, and you still get to summon something out from the deck. So either a Magnamhut for follow-up, or a Persona Dragon as an interruption. And even if they do nib you at this point, Absolute Dragon still triggers as Chainlink 1, summoning out Vortex. And Vortex can use its unsummon effect to bounce the nib to the hand. So they don't even get to keep the 3k Nibiru on field. But that's what I mean by unhand trappable. Like, there's really only one point, which is when you normal summon this, where your opponent can make a meaningful hand trap. By the way, the play's not over. Because now you are going to use Odd-Eyes Pendulum Dragon's scale effect during the end phase to blow itself up. And search Performapal Monkeyboard, which gives you insane follow-up. Konami, why is this searchable by Odd-Eyes? That's so stupid. And of course, you're going to trigger Arc Pendulum to summon out a Persona from the deck. So with that, you end on Persona, number 1, Seal, number 2, Persona Dragon from deck, which is what Seal is going to summon, number 3, and Vortex Dragon, number 4. So that's 4 interruptions, although of course it took 4 cards. But the important part is that, again, it was, I don't want to say uninterruptible, but, you know, it was, if they imperm your Darkwurm, nobody cares. That's like the least of my concerns. So it's resilient to hand traps. I guess that's a better way of putting it. And again, you have insane follow-up, because now you have this guy to complete your low scale, plus you have Skullcrobat, which you can obviously search something, but also you can then use him to go into Beyond the Pendulum next turn. So that was the second one. Now, the next combo is actually a series of combos. It's basically what you can do when you make Beyond the Pendulum before your Pendulum summon. So I'm going to show off the combos with Skullcrobat, Joker, and Dragon Shrine, but I don't want you to get fixated on these 2 cards specifically and, you know, having to do the combo exactly like this. Because basically, any time that you can make Beyond the Pendulum before your pen summon, you're going to be able to make some variation on the combos that I'm going to show you. It's just that it's easier to show it with these cards because this is the best way to do it. But, you know, drawing these 2 cards specifically, even if you max out, like 3 Joker, 1 Monkeyboard, 3 Shrine, 1 Foolish, even then it's only like a 1 in 6 chance to draw them both. So that's why, you know, I don't want you to think you need to draw these specifically. Just get the idea from it, okay? So if you have just these 2 cards, for example, you would Dragon Shrine for Darkwurm. Darkwurm summons itself out. Effect to search. We search out a gate. Normal summon Joker. Joker will search out either Persona or Arc. Doesn't matter which, because the other one will be searched by Beyond. So I'm just going to search Arc. Then we use these 2 as material for Beyond the Pendulum. Search out Persona Dragon. And at this point, we can low scale, high scale, and pend out for Trace. So you penned out 3. And this is going to look familiar. You're going to use Gate 0 or Infinity on Persona. Pop them both. Summon out a dragon from deck. Doesn't matter which for this combo. Trigger this. Trigger this. This goes into scale. Arc summons from deck. A Dissolver. And at this point, you Dissolver to fuse into a Vortex. And you 1, 2, 3, 4 link into a format Appaloosa. Now, that was just with Shrine plus Joker, but if you had another card, you could have done something a little bit different. So let me just go back a second. So right before linking into Appaloosa, this was the board. Since obviously you're going to start out with a 5-card hand, if you had any other monster to Pendulum summon out, you could have summoned out that. Let's just say you had a Odd-Eyes Dragon in your hand. You would have also Pendulum summoned out that. Then you could use these 3 for Appaloosa, so 1, 2, 3, and 4. This time for a 3-mat Appaloosa. And 2 level 4s, you can overlay these into your rank 4 of choice, which for me would be Abyss Dweller. For this deck, at least, I should say. And just like that, with 1 extra card, you can end on Appaloosa Vortex, but also Abyss Dweller. Or, again, any rank 4 of your choice. But wait, there's more. Because let's say you had another card. Let's say you had this exact same setup, but you had 1 more search. So let's say you had an extra Revolution Dragon in your hand, or you had like Sky Iris. what you could do is one of my favorite plays right now, because it's funny, because it's hilarious, is that you can search out Odd Eyes Phantom. And Odd Eyes Phantom, his scale effect can boost any monster in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh!, not just Odd Eyes cards. So what you can do, scale him, and during your opponent's turn, let's say they've used up 2 of the Appaloosa negates, and he's down at 800 attack. Normally, that's when people would try to crash over him. But if they try to crash over him, Odd Eyes Phantom is going to activate it. It's going to activate, boosting him by 1200 attack, basically up to 2000 attack, right? 800 plus 12. What that means is that unless they have something like a Kashtira, which they can just hard special summon, right? Or a Pankratops or something like that, they're not going to be able to run over Appaloosa with a normal summon and with most Link 2s. Like, they're going to have to commit somehow to actually out that Appaloosa if you can actually set it up with Phantom Dragon. And I find that absolutely hilarious. That being said, it's good to know that you can do this, but I still prefer making Seal as opposed to Appaloosa, unless I actually know what I'm going up against. Strictly because it's very good, generally speaking, in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's very good to have different kinds of interruptions. So for example, all of these are just negates. This is a negate for the graveyard, basically. This is a negate, which is good, but some decks can play through negates, or can play through at least monster negates better than other decks, but they can't play through something like a Hieratic Seal bouncing them. And also, since this is a Pendulum deck, one of the things that you have to keep in mind at all times is that if you're playing against a deck that can make XYCs, then you're always under the threat of getting Zeused and having your scales wiped. And you don't want that at all. And obviously Seal can help stop that, because obviously if they actually try to go into the battle phase with only one XYC, you just bounced it in the battle phase. So that's also another reason why I like ending on Seal, again, unless I actually know the matchup. Because if I know the matchup and I know Appaloosa or Dweller is better, then I'll go for that. Also, key thing to keep in mind is that it's not really about making an unbreakable board. You just need to make enough interruptions to where your opponent can't set up on you. So as long as you're smart in where you stop your opponent, you'll be fine. But basically, those are some of the different M boards that you can do going first. But of course, we don't always go first. Sometimes we will be going second, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. The reality is, as long as you're not floodgated out of the game, you can put up a good fight going second. And even then, I've had my fair share of encounters with cards like Naturia Exterior, Naturia Beast, Gimmick Puppet, and other stuff. And some of those games I have been able to win even through those absurd cards. Actually, I do want to talk about this right now that I bring it up. I'll just give some quick anecdotes because I think it's easier to explain it that way. So one was an example where I activated this in the scale. And mind you, I'm playing Gate Infinity. So if this doesn't get negated, I can just scale Gate Infinity from the deck and Pendulum summon out my entire hand. So they negated this with a Naturia Beast. But at that point, it goes to the graveyard. Use its grave effect to summon itself out. At that point, you normal summon out anything. Doesn't really matter what, as long as it's another level 4. You make your rank 4 of choice. In this case, Abyss Dweller. Crash into anything as long as it's in defense or it has less attack than this. And then main phase 2, make a Zeus. Blow up their board, including the floodgate, the Naturia Beast in that case. And obviously at that point, you're free to play the game. So that was one example of something that happened. Another one was that my opponent set up Naturia Beast plus IP and some other random stuff, but no monster negates. So during their end phase, I Magnamhuted for a random dark they had engraved, and phase searched out Persona Dragon. And in my main phase, as the first action before they triggered IP, I tribute this off for Persona Dragon, use its effect to negate the Naturia Exterior, and then I could obviously play out my hand from there. And another example, this one's a little bit simpler. Now this one has come up multiple times because it just does. Is again, they'd like Nat Beast me or something stupid, so I can't like play my scales. Normal summon Joker, use this effect to search out Dissolver, battle phase, attack with Joker into anything. Use Dissolver's secret damage step effect to summon itself out, and so this can't be destroyed by that battle. And main phase 2, use Dissolver to either make Gatling Ghoul or make Vortex Dragon and bounce the attack position Nat Beast or whatever it was. And I've done that play multiple times. Now, obviously, all those 3 plays have 2 things in common. Number 1 is that all of those plays would have lost to a single imperm. So I want to point it out, obviously, that I'm not saying that was the end all be all. Like, definitely, if my opponents in those scenarios had an extra interruption, they could have stopped that. But the real point I want to make with those 3 examples was that the more things that you can do outside of your Pendulum summon, specifically before your Pendulum summon, the better time you're gonna have. Again, you don't really want your Pendulum summon to be your opening play, because that makes you way too susceptible to all kinds of stuff. Like, you want to push back your Pendulum summon as far as possible and make it like the last thing you do throughout the turn. And like you saw, playing different cards like Zeus, like the Bystials, like knowing Dissolver's hand effect, help you do exactly that. Have different plays outside of your Pendulum summon so that you're able to play through more stuff and you can navigate different boards. So obviously there is some blowout stuff that can happen to you. Like, for example, Kashtira locking out a single one of your pen zones, the Gimmick Puppet, which I've said a billion times, Dimensional Barrier, Nat Beast, etc. And of course, I've also lost Nat Beast before. You don't always have the out, or sometimes even if you do have the out, they still have the counterplay. But the point still stands, So I definitely wouldn't say that this deck is on the level to be able to compete with those kinds of strategies. But against tier 2 decks and maybe even tier 1.5 decks, as long as you know what you're doing, you're definitely going to be able to at least put up a good fight. So now on to the actual profile. For those of you that are visual, this is what the whole deck list looks like. But of course, I'm also going to go card by card and explain everything in depth. You'll notice I'm playing 42 cards, but consistency really is not an issue, especially when I have 20 different ways to get to the best card in the deck, which is Archpendulum Dragon. So consistency is not an issue. And on top of that, you can always just make Beyond the Pendulum to search it out if you still haven't drawn it. Also, a heads up, I will be showing the cards in order of importance and also in order of which cards generate advantage. So yeah, let's get to it. So firstly, we have 3 copies of Odd-Eyes Archpend plus 3 copies of Summoner's Art. Archpend is the best card in your deck. It generates you all the advantage. Well, not all the advantage, but it's your main advantage generating tool. So you definitely want to max out on it. And I've had people ask me, and it's a fair question, why would you play so many copies of something if it's already so highly searchable? Well, because there's this thing called Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. There's this thing called Infinite Impermanence. There's this thing called Gamma and Driver, what's their name, etc., etc. And when you're going second, there's also a bunch of other interruptions. So just because something is highly searchable doesn't mean that your searches are always resolving. And especially when you're going second, the moment your opponent figures out what you're trying to do, this is the first thing that they're going to try to pop or banish. So you definitely want to be able to have multiples in hand, or at least have access to multiple of this in hand. You don't just want to have the one of in your hand and get it MSD'd, right? So yeah, you definitely want to max out on that. Also, this thing being 2700 attack is still relevant. There are many important cards that your opponent will end on that have exactly 2500 attack or 2500 defense. And this being 2700 and being able to be Pendulum summoned out or summoned from the deck with its own effect, because this can summon another copy of itself, is very important in various different matchups. You just gotta keep that in mind and not forget about it. Also, very important is that this is a normal monster, so unfortunately you cannot use it as a material to make Beyond the Pendulum because she requires effect monsters. But other than that, this card is amazing all around. So yeah, then we have basically 6 hard copies of Darkwurm. Quick story, but before I used to not want to play more than one of this, just Foolish Burial and Dragon Shrine, just because I didn't want any dead top decks, because my whole shtick back then was that I wanted the deck to be consistent and have like no brick hands or no dead top decks. But that has a very easy workaround, which is called adding other targets, right? So if I ever draw this and I already have, a monster on field, so I can't send Darkwurm, I have basically another target in Destrudo, the Lost Dragon's Frisson. So I still have something to do. And again, it's so stupid, but beyond the Pendulum being semi-generic means that, you can send this, to the grave and use it to summon back, basically as another extender to use for going into Beyond the Pendulum. And this has other benefits as well. I'll get to it when I get to it. Also, the reason I'm playing 2, because I would rather play 3 actual copies of it. But the reason I'm playing 2 is because I basically have 5 normal summons in the deck. 2 of those plus 2 Joker and 1 Monkeyboard. And Monkeyboard can only search Joker in this deck. It has no other targets, so this is basically a third Monkeyboard. And some of you might already know, but when you're playing a 40-card deck, the mathematically correct number of normal summons you want is 5. But I'm not doing it just because of the math. I actually was playing at one point 3 Joker, 3 Darkwurm, and it did get clunky. Like you could feel the clunkiness, specifically because even though yes, this is a Pendulum deck, meaning that in theory you can summon out any extra monsters from your hand. You can just Pendulum summon them out. But this is mainly a level 7 and rank 7 deck, and the better low skills or the best low skills that you have are skill 4, or to be specific, these 3 guys, because again, when you're going first, you want to use this so that even if you get a hand trap, you still get the end phase effect. When you're going second, I almost always will be scaling one of these 2, because this card's insane. I'll get to it when I get to it. And this card's also insane in the scale when going second, because realistically, when you're going second, you're never resolving this guy on the field, like his monster effect, because he's always going to get negated. But his scale effect, being a spell card, is much more likely to resolve. And because I didn't want to have any kind of conflict, and again, this is a rank 7 deck, so Pendulum summoning out level 4s doesn't even do that much for me. That is basically why I only wanted 5 normal summons, right? And in testing, in practice, this number ended up being, good. I really like how it works like that. Also, Dragon Shrine has the marginal benefit that if you, for example, draw this plus the Bystial Magnamhut, you can send Odd Eyes Arc to the graveyard, and then you send Darkwurm, and then you can banish this card for the Bystial Magnamhut. Also, if you play Odd Eye Seer, which I'm not playing, but if you're playing Odd Eye Seer, then same thing. You can send this and this, and then you can grab this back with Odd Eye Seer. And also, these can bait for a hand trap before your Pendulum summon, meaning that they can try to bait for TTT. So anything that can bait out for TTT before my Pendulum summon is nice. So the next thing is 4 copies of Sky Iris. I do know the arguments that people make for playing less copies, but this card's just too nice, man. It's too nice for too many reasons. And number 1, it's another way to arc. Number 2, it again gives you things to do before your Pendulum summon, which is important for multiple things. Number 1, baiting for triple tactics. Number 2, when going second, you can do some funky stuff like triggering Arc Pendulum before your Pendulum summon. So you summon out Persona, and you can use Persona to start baiting out your opponent's interruptions. Number 3, it's another way to search out Dissolver to the hand and protect him in scale, so you can fusion summon. You can guarantee a fusion play. And overall, it's just too nice. 3 copies of Revolution Dragon. Cards cracked. Cards not once per turn. Cards cracked. That's all I have to say. Although, I will ask, I guess, one thing, which is that if somebody has a way to consistently get this guy on the field without it being like a complex 6-card play, and if you can do that through interruptions, you can show me how you can do that through interruptions, I will PayPal you $5, because this card's on field effect is absolutely insane. Oh, in the TCG, not in Master Duel. This card's field effect is insane, but I have no idea how to consistently get it on the field when I want to. Yeah, that's all. Card's insane though. So then we have, like I already kind of explained, Monkeyboard and Joker. I'll start out by talking about Monkeyboard. As you saw in the combos, Monkeyboard, because of its 1000 attack, is searchable off of Odd Eyes Pend. So if you can make your combo without using Odyssey Pendulum Dragon and just scaling it, you can search this, and obviously this is insane follow-up for you. Also, Monkeyboard has a funny secret effect on him that basically says that he can reduce the level of a pendulum monster in my hand. So technically, he can reduce the level of something like Revo to 11, which would mean that a scale 12 could summon him out. Or you could reduce the level of Dissolver into a 7 and you could pendulum summon him out. But that hasn't come up for me, but it's good to know, what your cards do, because in theory that could come up. Otherwise, the card's just nice, bro. It's like a +2. Then we have Joker. It's funny because going first, my preferred normal summon is Darkwurm, strictly because Darkwurm is a dragon. Well, that, and also because going first, it searches me the gates, which obviously let me pop my own cards. Whereas going second, me popping my own cards isn't as important because obviously I can just crash into my opponent and pop my own cards that way, in order to trigger Arc Pendulum, which is why Joker's better going second, because obviously it just searches me engine, whereas going first, Darkwurm searches me the gates so I can combo. So, there's a bit of a dichotomy there. Oh, and like I said earlier, he's a 1-card Vortex going second. Well, a 1-card Fusion going second if you search Dissolver. So keep that in mind. Then we have 3 copies of the Bystial Magnamhut. So originally, I first considered it with Lubellion, the Bystial Lubellion, because if you had Bystial Lubellion, then Lubellion would discard itself to search this, and then you'd have a, Light or Dark in the Grave. But ain't no way this nigga is paying $60, $70, $80 for that trash-ass Lubellion, bro. That card is so ass cakes. But I will not rant more. Point is, and also part of me wanting to update this deck was to make a video on it if I felt it was worth making a video. So I anyways wasn't going to include Lubellion just because I know most people that play this are budget players. But that being said, even though ideally Lubellion would be a nice card to play, this card still checks out because of multiple things. Number one, the 3 Dragon Shrine, like I said, can set up a Dark in the Grave by sending our Pendulum. Number 2, you have at least 10 ways that I could count off the top of my head to get to Revolution Dragon. And obviously Revolution Dragon, once it discards itself, it's a Light in Grave for this card. In total, that's like 13 cards that can get you a Dark or Light in Grave before your Pendulum summon. Summoning this on turn 0, when your opponent starts and you're going second, is absolutely cracked because you end with a monster on field and you fix your hand because you get to search Revo, Revolution Dragon, in the end phase. Oh, and like I said earlier, he gives you more layers of gameplay because that way you're not just Pendulum summoning, like you're doing things outside of your Pendulum summon. And I will repeat this for emphasis. The more things that you can do outside of the Pendulum summon, especially beforehand, the better time you're going to have. Then 3 copies of TTT. Kind of explained what I wanted to explain already. The hand rip effect is unfair. The monster steal effect is also unfair and helps make Beyond the Pendulum. Just for that alone, for the monster effect alone, I highly recommend this card. But very important, you gotta know how to bait for it. Like I've lost duels which were 100% winnable just for not knowing how to bait my opponent into triggering this. So yeah, keep that in mind. 3 copies of Spiral Flame Strike. You definitely should play 3. Not only is it not once per turn and search everything, but also there are plays where you search 2 of these to your hand in one single turn. So if you already drew one, let's say if you're only playing 2 and you already drew one, then you're not going to be able to do that play. So you definitely want to play all 3. Plus, and I will continue to repeat this, this is another card that also baits for triple tactics because obviously going second, you target whatever the most important card is and they're forced to negate or to respond to you. And that way your triple T is live. Then 1 copy of Duelist Alliance. Only 1 copy because I only have 2 targets. Odd Eyes Arc and the original Odd Eyes Pendulum's Dragon. Basically, I just don't ever want to have 2 of this in my hand because if I have 2 of these in my hand, the second one is dead. And technically speaking, you could make the same argument for triple tactics, for Sky Iris, and for the 4 Dragon Shrine cards. But the difference with all 3 of those is that those 3 actually generate me some kind of advantage. So even if I draw 2 of them, one pays for the other, so to speak. This one doesn't pay for itself. But again, it's another way to see your best card, so you still play the one-off. Then we have this funny card, Destrudo, the Lost Dragon's Frisson. So This card's very funny because of multiple things. Number one, like I said, it's an extender from the grave or hand, meaning that it's a free way, well, free. It's another way to make Beyond the Pendulum. That's number one. Number two, it's a dragon, so you can make it for seal. Number three, or you can summon it for seal, I meant. And number three, and probably one of the most important things, it is a dragon level 7 monster, which means not only can you use it for Absolute Dragon, but very importantly, you can use it for Rebellion into Overlord, because Rebellion's materials are 2 level 7 dragons. And it has already happened more than once that I will actually just hard Pendulum summon this out, overlay it with one of my odd eyes for Rebellion and then Overlord, and then just punch for game like that. So Destrudo is very, very nice, and it makes it so that your dragon shrines are never dead. What you do have to keep in mind is that since Beyond the Pendulum does pay 1200 life points to activate its effect, if you already used Destrudo in the duel and you've maybe taken damage, or maybe you've already gone through one copy of Beyond, if you use this again, you might not be able to go into, well, you might not be able to use the second Beyond's effect to search. Then we have Gate 0 and Gate Infinity. These cards are not dead to draw. You can play out your hand just fine if you draw either of them, because again, going first or second, you can use their monster effects to pop an Odd Eyes card and trigger Arc Pendulum. But I'm only playing one-on-one because, like I said, I want to maximize on cards that generate advantage, and these cards on their own don't generate advantage. Darkwurm searching them does. So that's why I'm only playing one-on-one. Aside from that, the reason I'm playing like one-on-one instead of 2-0 or 2-0 is because simply, you know, depending on the scenario, sometimes you actually want to have a low scale, and sometimes you want to actually have a high scale to scale off of Darkwurm's scale effect. Because obviously you're not going to search this with Darkwurm's monster effect, because if you search this, then you can't actually Pendulum summon, right? Because you're going to have Darkwurm on field. Unless you do some crazy stuff like normal summon Darkwurm, search this, and then pop the Darkwurm with Sky Iris. I guess that would work. But generally speaking, I'm playing this just so my Darkwurm is a 1-card full scales, right? You'd have scales 5 to 13. Granted, you can't summon out Persona because it's a level 5. And you cannot summon out Revo because if you use Darkwurm's scale effect, you're locked into dark monsters, and Revolution Dragon is a light monster. But otherwise, this card has come up multiple times where I get like Zeused, or I just get, you know, my field blown up somehow, and I need like a 1-card full scales. Then 3 copies of Odd Eyes Persona Dragon. 3 copies is 100,000 million% the right amount. Actually, that's not the right amount. The right amount would be 4 copies. If only I could, right? But yeah, 1000%. 3 copies is the right amount. Why is that? Because when you're going first, oftentimes you're gonna end on Persona Dragon plus Seal plus Arc Pend in scale plus some other random stuff. And 99 times out of 100, what's gonna happen is that you're gonna use Seal to bounce something. Seal Grave Effect will summon out a Persona from the deck with 0/0 stats, because that's what Seal says. Your opponent is gonna think that they're smart, and they're just gonna go into battle phase, attack over this one, thinking that that way they're gonna clear one of your interruptions, and then you just use Arc Pendulum Dragon to summon the 3rd one from the deck. And then they're like, damn, you're just that much better than me. And then you answer, yes, I am much better than you, thank you. So yes, and that play, exactly as I just said, it has happened countless times. Not only that, but something else that has come up is that, number one, drawing it going first just means that you have an extra interruption for free. But drawing it going second means that you're able to trade into your opponent's board better. And what I mean by that is that, you know, if you hard draw 1 or 2 of these, as soon as you Pendulum summon out, you can immediately start turning off your opponent's boss monsters. So in that regard, you know, they help you push when going second, you know, make a push going second. So then we have 1 copy of OG Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon. I love that you actually have to play this card, not just for lore, but because he actually, you know, makes sense. Because like I said, his skill effect, number 1, searches Monkeyboard, which is broken, and number 2, it triggers Arc. So there's a lot of funny interactions with that. But also, his monster effect is very how do I put this? It comes up if you actually know it's a possibility. Like if you remember that his monster effect reaction force can outright kill your opponent, like it will come up. Especially when I talk about this next card, which is Phantom Dragon. So Phantom Dragon is very nice, and it's funny because before, this was always the first odd ice I try to like get into my extra deck so I could Pendulum summon him out later for his monster effect and burn people. But now it's the complete opposite. Now this is the last card I ever take out of my deck. Like I always try to make sure it's in my deck because his scale effect is extremely nice if used well. Because number one, this combos with Odd Ice Pendulum Dragon. If your opponent leaves a monster with low attack on the field, which sometimes some decks, just because of the way they work, they do end on a monster with like less than 2,000 attack on the field. This Phantom scale effect combos with Odd Ice's monster effect because it boosts Odd Ice to 3,700 and you're doing double damage, which means that potentially if your opponent had a monster, for example, with 0 attack and defense, you'd be doing 3,700 times 2, meaning you'd actually be doing 7,400 damage with a single attack, which is absolutely insane. And there have been some games where you can cheese people, because there's no other word for it. You're literally just cheesing people by doing this exact technique. Attack for, I don't know, like 5,000 damage. And main phase 2, you make Performapal Gatling Ghoul and just burn them for the last like 3k they had left. And that alone, again, there's no other word for it other than cheese. But, you know, a win is a win, god damn it. So we take those, motherfucker. We take those. So that's definitely something that you want to keep in mind as a possibility, because you can just close out games just like that. But not only that, even though I am a Yu-Gi-Oh player, I have actually learned to start reading my own cards. Gasp. And what I learned is that this boost actually lasts until the end of the battle phase, the skill effect, which is extremely nice because this also combos with Rebellion Overlord. As long as the first attack that this does, that Overlord does, is on a monster, it's gonna get 42. It's gonna get boosted to 4,200, and then you still have 2 more attacks while he's at 4,200. Meaning, just for example, if your opponent has 1 monster in the field, let's just say it's in defense, this guy can attack into the monster, boost to 42, and then attack twice more for game. So I've also closed out many games doing exactly that play, which is just hilarious. But it's very important for you to know, because if you've actually tried playing this card, you'll know that one of the frequent things that comes up is that this thing having 3k attack is kind of awkward, because there's so many things that also have 3k attack or 3k defense that sometimes you can't actually clear the important stuff. And being boosted to 42 for all 3 attacks is a game changer. Then we have Odd Eyes Wizard Dragon, probably my favorite card of the deck just because it's so stupid. Ideally, you do not want to summon this off of Arc Pendulum Dragon, but rather you want to search him if you have the chance to, because if you use Arc Pendulum to summon him out, sure, you can crash him and you get to summon something else out, as well as searching for Spiral Flame Strike. But if instead of doing that, you would have actually Pendulum summon him out, then you can crash him. His effect will summon something out and get you a search. Arc is gonna revive him, then you crash him again. You get to summon something else out and you get to search another Spiral Flame Strike, which is what I was alluding to earlier, that you can search 2 of them. But that play is only available to you if you actually Pendulum summon him out, not if you're summoning him from deck. So definitely keep that in mind. And the last card is Dissolver. This is the only card that you don't really want to draw when going first, just because the combos are better when you summon him from the deck when going first. Going second, he's fine to draw. He's not great, but he's fine to draw. You can still fuse with him in scale, and you can still summon him out with his monster effect, so it's fine. But he's the only awkward-ish card to draw. Everything else is fine. Also, should point out, but his monster effect is actually not hard once per turn. There's some combos that have to do with that, but I'm not playing any of those combos in this deck. But it actually did come up once for me, the fact that it's not once per turn. Because basically, I summoned him out. I don't remember how, but I summoned him out. Used this effect to fuse. Opponent didn't respond. Made Vortex. Then when Vortex was summoned, he flipped something. It was Trap Tricks. They flipped something on it. I chained Vortex to negate, and then they just flipped Floodgate Trap Hole on it. So Vortex still resolved, negating the first card, but it still went face down permanently. But since it resolved, I just shuffled back the Dissolver. I had just used this material, and I did some other shenanigan that turn. I don't remember what it was, but I did some other shenanigan where eventually I got him again onto the field, and I just used his effect again to make the second Vortex Dragon, which was pretty funny. It was actually insanely funny to do. So onto the extra deck, we have 2 copies of Vortex Dragon. You play the second one because the first one might get banished, or like I said in that example, I guess it could get Floodgate Trap Hold. Very important to note, its on summon effect can miss the timing because it's a when you can effect. So keep that in mind if you ever summon this like inside a chain link, that if you make it like chain link 2 or higher, the summon of Vortex, then he won't bounce something. Otherwise, it's come up now multiple times, the fact that Vortex is a level 7. Because in general, Vortex is good going second, obviously, because on summon, he will try to bounce something, your opponent will try to negate him or do something, and then you'll just negate him back. So he'll just end up trading with 2 of your opponent's cards in that regard. And because he's a level 7, I will then use him plus any other level 7 I have as a material for Rebellion and for Overlord, and just punch for game that way. That has come up multiple times, because again, this basically clears or helps clear some of the interruptions your opponent otherwise would have had. Then we have 1 copy of Gatling Ghoul. He doesn't come up often, but when he does, I am very glad that I run him. And also the fact that the pop is non-targeting is so nice. Starving Venom, this is your out to Towers monsters. That's basically it. Then we have what is probably one of my favorite cards in the extra deck. Probably my, oh darn, I don't want to choose favorites. That's kind of like saying who's your favorite kid, but god damn it. It's one of my favorites. So Gaia Armor Dragon Shell. Now this card is played only for its grave effect. So basically this is a dragon synchro monster, which means that I can summon it off of Gate Zero's monster effect. And basically what you do is you equip it from the graveyard onto either Hieratic Seal or Appaloosa. So let me just make that visual. You equip it to your seal, and what that means is that if your opponent thinks they're smart and tries to attack the seal or the Appaloosa, either one, at the very least, you're getting a card out of it. And basically for the rest of the duel, you're going to have free draws pretty much every turn, at least every one of your turns, because you can always equip this to something, you know, either an extra deck boss monster you made, or if you just Pendulum summon out one of your Pendulum monsters from the extra deck, then you can equip this to that Pendulum monster. It doesn't come up often because many duels are decided, you know, fairly quickly within like 2 or 3 turns. But in the duels that do become a grind game, that's when this card shines. So it's very, very nice and very, very free, because you don't have to make anything different in terms of what your plays are. You just need to make sure that at some point throughout the duel, you use Gate Zero's effect to summon this out, and at that point you're free to draw a card every turn, basically. Then we have 1 copy of Absolute Dragon. Usually, I'll prefer to use Dissolver to go into Vortex if I have the choice, because that way Vortex is fusion summon. But if Dissolver gets negated, or if, you know, I want to go for a specific combo line, then this is obviously a good second alternative. Or if you want to be very fancy, if you already went through your Dissolver, once this goes to your grave, you can actually summon out Dissolver from your extra deck and then use Dissolver to, you know, properly fusion summon out a Vortex or a Gatling Ghoul or a Starving, or, you know, whatever you need in that moment. Then we have what is probably the single best change in the deck. By the way, shout out to Mr. Oxanium for reminding me to read my own cards, because I can't read. But bro, this card closes out games and it's not even funny. And what's really insane isn't just that, is that if you don't finish the game right there for whatever reason, in main phase 2, you can do one of the dumbest things available nowadays, which is to Zeus, to make a Zeus for 4 materials, meaning you have 2 sends. And I should point out, obviously this is a Pendulum deck. Getting Zeus hurts you as well, a little bit, but there's a few workarounds for that. Number 1, If you used Magnamhut at any point throughout that turn, that means at the worst, during the end phase, you're getting a search for Revolution Dragon. Oh, and I forgot to mention it, but Magnamhut searches from the hand or grave, meaning that you can add back Revolution Dragons that are in the grave. So you can potentially use more than 3 Revolution Dragons in one duel. Number 2 is that you can use this effect to wipe the board, and in main phase 2, scale this and use its scale effect to revive back Vortex, meaning that for your opponent's turn, they have to deal with an Omni Negate, and then after that, they have to deal with a Zeus. Another thing that you can do, if throughout your turn you are able to search out the original Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon, then you can scale him and use his end phase effect to search out Monkeyboard. And obviously Monkeyboard for your next turn is full scales. The next card I'm playing is Abyss Dweller. Now I'm playing this for a very specific reason, and it's that this deck does not have good ways of interacting with the graveyard. Technically speaking, if you could actually consistently and on demand get Revolution Dragon on the field, then his on-field effect is an insane effect to deal with graveyard stuff. But because I don't know how to get him on the field consistently, this is the next best thing. It's funny because at one point I even considered playing Kashtira Arise Heart because, you know, it just takes 3 level 7s, but that was a little bit too much. But also what I noticed in testing is that having a rank 4 is nice because, like I said in the example, this is another way I can threaten making a Zeus before my Pendulum summon, meaning that I can potentially clear out or at least bait out my opponent's interruptions before, you know, full committing into the Pendulum. Then we have 2 copies of Beyond the Pendulum. Now, the reason I'm running 2 copies of this is actually the same exact reason I'm running 2 copies of Hieratic Seal, and it's that sometimes, due to your hand or just due to the matchup, you're going to go into Beyond the Pendulum turn 1, and then you're going to want another Beyond the Pendulum for the follow-up play. And sometimes you're going to want, actually most of the time in my case, I'm going to want a Hieratic Seal turn 1, and I'm going to want a Hieratic Seal for the follow-up play. You know, if I'm not able to finish them off and I want to end on another boss monster or interruption, I guess. Also, don't sleep on her. Y'all shouldn't sleep on her effective pop cards. Like, even if you don't get the search effect, because like I said, with Destrudo, you might be in a situation where you can't pay 1200. Her effective pop cards is very nice. You know, it's basically spot removal. So the last card is Appaloosa, Bow of the Goddess. Card's nice. So that was basically the important part about this video. Now I'm just gonna give you random facts, not facts, but random, I don't even want to call them tips, just random bits of information regarding Odd Eyes and different interactions that you can consider, and also some other combos. So firstly, actually, I do want to show one thing off. It's not like a crazy combo or anything, it's just a very interesting thing I noticed when testing, which was what to do if you open Sky Iris, Arc Pendulum, and any low scale. You're going to use Sky Iris to pop your low scale, search out Revolution Dragon, Arc Pen summon Dissolver from deck, then you use Revolution to search out Darkwurm, which then searches out Gate 0, Dissolver to fuse with Arc, and at this point you use Vortex and what's this name to make Beyond the Pendulum. Search another Revel from deck, scale the Revolution, and Pendulum summon out for 2. You summon out this, and you summon out anything really. And then right here, obviously they can nib you. If they don't nib you, then you just make Appaloosa. And then you use Revolution Dragon's scale effect to bring back your Vortex Dragon. So it's not a crazy combo or anything. I just found it really funny because it used Revolution Dragon as an actual skill 12 to Pendulum summon out things from the extra deck. And you then use its other effect, you know, scale effect to revive Odd Eyes Vortex. So I just thought it was a bit of an interesting play. Maybe some other things could be done with that. Now I do want to mention some cards that I either was running or chose not to run, starting by Odd Eyes Seer. Now in my opinion, this card has a lot of potential, like a lot. I just haven't figured out what that potential is. Because even though yes, he can trigger Arc Pendulum, I already have a way to do that. It's called Gate 0, it's called Gate Infinity, it's called Sky Iris, and it's called crashing into my opponent's monster. So you know, it's not like that wasn't something I didn't already have a way to do. And in testing, yes, there are some niche scenarios where having this card specifically is very, very nice. And he obviously allows for some combos that weren't previously possible without him. But along with those upsides, there's also a lot of downsides. Like number 1, he's not a dragon. Number 2, he's not a level 7. Number 3, he has basically no attack. So summoning him out, like Pendulum summoning him out, has almost no value. And yes, I do know he has monster effects. But again, you gotta find a way to actually make him work and make him work consistently. You want cards that can work in multiple different scenarios, not just one specific scenario through no hand traps, right? So I still haven't found a way to make him work, but I do think that the card has potential. Another card that I really wanted to work is Astrograph Sorcerer. But kind of the same thing. I just haven't found a way to make him work because yes, he is a +1. Yes, he summons himself. I'm not gonna get too into the details. I just haven't found a way to make him work consistently. So another thing I thought about for like half a second was Performapal Horseradish, just because it summons itself out and it's searchable off of Monkeyboard and Joker. That's kind of funny, but it only works going second. Kind of awkward. Track Black. This card is so funny because basically what you do is that you use it if you know that you can't kill your opponent. So you make that card. Overlord attacks 3 of your opponent's monsters. That way you get to draw 3 cards and then you Zeus him in main phase 2. And the point is that you get to Zeus your opponent, but you get to fill up your hand. So you have follow-up for days. Very funny, but I don't have the extra deck space for it. Otherwise, I would run. Baron the Fleur is actually summonable right now as my build is, but it's only doable off of Destrudo. And Destrudo, as it is, only comes up rarely. So it was just too niche, way too niche. Also, a bit of hopium, but Magnamhut is a level 6, and you play 3 of them. And Monkeyboard is also a level 6. So if you really wanted to, you could bring back the old school combos where you make Utopia Beyond to decrease your opponent's attack to 0, and then Utopia Beyond plus Odd Ice is game. A bit of hopium, but you could do it. You could do it. Performapal Gentru is nice. I haven't figured out how to break him though. Performapal Coin Dragon combos with Overlord. Gate Infinity's monster effect can summon out Rebellion. So in theory, you can use this to summon this out, pop it or just crash it, and then scale it. And with that, you can scale any other card, any other Pendulum in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh to your field. But I don't really know if there's a way to break that, especially because Beyond the Pendulum already searches any Pendulum in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh. Technically speaking, you could run Gold Pride. I also got that idea from the Odd Ice Discord. You know, their effects are live as long as you have less life points than your opponent. And Revolution Dragon pays life points. Beyond the Pendulum pays life points. And of course, Destrudo pays life points. So there you go. Meteor Burst can help you fusion summon twice, because you can use Dissolver's scale effect to fusion summon. Then if you later make Meteor Burst can summon out Dissolver, and then you can use his monster effect to fusion summon. So this is the end of the video. Hopefully you were able to take some ideas from this and you can incorporate them in your own build and start testing things out yourself and seeing what you like, what you don't like, and making changes. Huge shout out to the comment section, because the only reason I made this video was because I still get comments from people either asking for an update or just, you know, asking my opinion on like new cards and things. And, you know, when I took a look at it, there really isn't that much Odd Ice content out there for the TCG. I know there's 1 or 2 things for Master Duel, but like actual Odd Ice content, not like Draco Slayer with 3 Revo Dragon, but like actual Odd Ice, there really isn't that much. And also, you know, when I looked at my video analytics, I could see that people were still looking at my old, like 1-year-old, 2-year-old videos. I was like, damn, people really, you know, still looking for information on this deck, right? So, hope you all enjoyed. Hope it was of benefit to you. If you have any questions or comment, you know where to leave them down below. Peace. Take care.
One more thing!
Konami, please. All I ask for is a super rare Wizard Dragon. That's it. Doesn't have to be ultra. Doesn't have to be secret. Just super. Literally every other good Odd Ice card has a foil printing. This is the only one that doesn't. Tanamusa, please.